You wake, the window blows, that sick amber light, that's the ridge, that's the sun cresting the ridge. Your eyelids, Lord of mercy, they're sticky, warm, crystalline. You try to open them and you feel the grit of something inside. Something hard and smooth and terrible. Your fingernails dig at your own face, scraping, scraping. The last thing you see before the world goes white and faceted is your reflection in the mirror. Two eyes like tumbled glass. Two perfect, horrible gems. Now, let's go back. Let me tell you how it started. My name is Samuel Kutke, and I reckon I'm the last person you'll hear speak on this matter. You're listening to me now 'cause everyone else in Hangin' Valley is listening to the dark instead. But I got time left, a little time, and I aim to spend it warning folks. There was a man named Thomas Wickham came to Breathitt County in the autumn of 2004. He was from Ohio, Flatlands, and he'd come into some property through a distant relative's will. A cabin built in 1887 by a man who took his own life at the bottom of a ravine. Thomas didn't know that. He saw the deed, saw the bargain price in a newspaper's classifieds, and figured he'd found something authentic, rustic, real. He was handy. He was young. He was the kind of man who thought he could solve anything. This is where I tell you he was wrong. The hollow where that cabin sat is a queer piece of geography. The valley sits low, cupped like a hand. The sun don't touch the bottom till near 8 in the morning, and it leaves by 4. Always been that way. But the locals, they got a feeling about the sunrise, an uneasiness worn into the bone of every family that stayed. When dawn comes, the people keep their curtains drawn, sit with their backs to the windows, and most important of all, they don't look. Thomas Wickham didn't know this yet. He arrived on a Tuesday, October the 18th, with a U-Haul trailer full of tools and optimism. I seen him drive through town, seen him stop at the general store for directions, seen the way the shopkeeper got real quiet-like when he asked about the cabin, seen the way she pointed him toward the valley without meeting his eyes. The cabin was exactly what he expected. Old, weathered, full of possibility. He spent that first night cleaning out the kitchen, sleeping on a dusty cot, and planning repairs. Didn't hear the wind sound like voices in the walls. Didn't notice the scuff marks on the floorboards. long, deliberate marks where something heavy had been dragged. It rained that night, a thin, cold rain that carries the smell of rot and mushrooms. Thomas opened a window, and rain come in sideways. But he didn't mind. He was tired. He slept. And the next morning, everything changed. When dawn broke, Thomas didn't draw the curtains. He didn't know to. He woke early with coffee on his mind and wandered into the kitchen. The window faced east, toward the ridge. And as he stood there, waiting for the coffee to brew, he noticed something. There was a shimmer on the trees. Across the property line, where the woods climbed the ridge, the hemlocks were glowing. Not with light, with something else. A ripple in the air. The shimmer moved slow and deliberate, descending as the sun rose invisible beyond the ridge. Thomas set down his cup and stepped closer. That's when the knock came. It was old Eunice Holbrook, 70 years in the valley, family there for generations before. She didn't wait for him to answer. She just came in, took his arm with a grip like a claw, and pulled him from the window. "You come away from that," she said. Thomas tried to laugh it off, but Eunice wouldn't have it. She sat him down at the table, and her voice came out low and rough. "You're new here. Nobody's told you." "Told me what?" Thomas asked. Eunice's eyes went to the window, then quick back. "There's something in the ridge," she whispered. "Something old. When the sun comes up, when that light moves down into the valley, it wakes hungry." Thomas figured her for crazy, but something in her voice, that desperate grip, made him listen. "You seen that shimmer?" Eunice leaned forward. "That's it moving. The glass eye harvester. It feeds on vision. Harvests the eyes themselves. Turns them to glass." Thomas should have asked more, should have recognized the terror in her face. But instead he thanked her politely, walked her to the door, and when she left, shaking her head like he was damned, he tried to forget. But he couldn't help noticing she'd never once looked toward the sunrise. 3 days Thomas spent in that cabin, and he was careful, real careful. He kept the curtains drawn. He didn't go outside during the morning hours, the dangerous time, as Eunice had called it. He worked on repairs in the afternoon and evening when the sun had already crossed over the ridge and was heading down toward the western slopes. But curiosity, it's a poison stronger than any distilled spirit in those hills. On the 4th day, Thomas decided he needed to see, needed to prove to himself that there was nothing to be afraid of. So he took a walk into the woods on his property, intentional like, waiting till the shimmering had begun, and he positioned himself behind a thick stand of hemlocks where he could peer out and see the light without being directly exposed. That's when he found the birds. There was maybe a dozen of them, cardinals mostly, bright red plumage dark with damp and frost. They were arranged in a semicircle, facing the ridge where the light was descending. And they weren't moving, weren't pecking at the ground or fluttering their wings or doing any of the normal things birds do. They were just staring. Thomas stepped closer, and his boots crunched on the frosted undergrowth. The sound was loud as a gunshot in the quiet hollow. But the birds, they didn't flinch, didn't startle, just kept staring into that shimmer on the trees. When Thomas got close enough to touch the nearest one, he saw why. Its eyes, Lord, its eyes. They was solid. Completely solid. Each eye was a perfect sphere of crystal clear quartz, smooth and refractive, catching the light and splitting it into tiny rainbows. The lids were sealed round them, fused shut by something that looked almost like ice, but couldn't be. 'Cause underneath that seal, you could see how the skin had crystallized, how the eyelashes had turned to glass filaments, delicate as spider silk. Thomas staggered backward, his mind trying to make sense of it. Some kind of disease, maybe? Some infection that calcified the eyes? He reached out again, careful now, real careful, and touched the bird's chest. It was cold, ice cold, frozen solid from the inside out. That's when he heard it. A sound like wind chimes, high and musical, coming from somewhere up the ridge, from the shimmer itself. And the shimmer, it stopped descending, paused, like it had heard him, like it had felt his attention. Thomas ran. He didn't process what he was running from, or why the sound of wind chimes in an empty forest felt like the worst thing he'd ever heard. He just ran back toward the cabin, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and he slammed the door shut and locked every lock. That evening he called Eunice, demanded she come back, and when she arrived, reluctant, afraid, but coming anyway, he showed her the dead birds without touching them, just pointing through the window. Eunice looked at the crystallized eyes and made a sound like a prayer. "You've called its attention now," she said. "It knows you're here. It knows you're curious. And tomorrow, when the dawn comes, you need to be ready." "Ready for what?" Thomas asked. But Eunice just shook her head and wouldn't say no more. And now, friend, we come to the worst part. The part where you're going to wish you'd never heard this story. But that's the way of warnings, ain't it? They only work if they're terrible enough to stick in your mind. Thomas Wickham didn't sleep that night. He sat in his living room with all the curtains drawn and the lights on, and he tried to rationalize, tried to think of medical explanations, geological anomalies, anything but the truth that was pressing down on him like a weight. But sometime around 3 a.m, exhaustion won out. His head drooped, his eyes closed, and he drifted off in that chair, unaware that the sun was approaching. He woke to amber light, not the gentle glow of normal dawn. No, this was something else. This was the kind of light that comes from fire, from fever, from some place that ain't quite natural. It poured through a gap in the curtains he'd left. Just an inch, barely a crack, but it was enough. Thomas's eyes snapped open, and in that moment of waking, his gaze fell directly on the window, directly on the shimmer. It was descending the ridge faster than it should, real fast. And this time, Thomas could see something inside it. A shape, a form, not quite solid, not quite vapor. Something that moved like wings and tentacles and hungry mouths all at once. Something with a hunger that had been ancient when the mountains were new. Thomas tried to look away, tried to shut his eyes, but his lids, they wouldn't move. He stood up, his body moving against his will, and he walked toward the window. Each step felt like walking through water, through cold, through the resistance of the earth itself. His hands came up. His fingers opened the curtains all the way. And the light, Lord, the light, it poured over him like an avalanche. This is where it gets real bad. Thomas felt something happening in his eyes. A change, a hardening, like frost was spreading from the corners of his vision, creeping inward, turning the soft tissue into something that glittered and sparkled. He tried to scream, but his throat, it was froze too. Everything was freezing from the inside out, crystallizing, turning into glass. He looked in the mirror, crazy with panic, needing to know what was happening. And he saw his eyes changing, saw the color drain out, saw him become clear and hard and perfect as cut diamond. The shimmer, it was feeding, and it was taking its time. The transformation didn't kill him right away. That was the mercy of it, or maybe the curse. His body, it remained flesh and blood, but his eyes, those two organs that had let him see the world, that had looked at sunrise and sunset and the faces of people he loved, they became glass, became stone, became something that would never see nothing again. When the sun had fully crossed the ridge and the shimmer began its ascent, carrying its gift back up the mountainside, Thomas Wickham fell to his knees and he wept. Real tears, actual liquid tears, because he could still feel his eyes, could still sense light and dark, but he couldn't see. The glass was opaque, you understand, cloudy, turned inward somehow, reflecting only the darkness that was his own inner world. Eunice found him 3 days later. The cabin was quiet. The door was locked from the inside. Thomas was sitting in a chair in the center of the room, his head tilted back, his hands in his lap. Real peaceful, if you didn't know what was wrong with his eyes. So now you know, friend. Now you heard the story of Thomas Wickham and the glass-eye harvester. And maybe you're thinking this is just a tale, just something to chill your bones before sleep. But I'm telling you true. There's hollow places in these mountains where the sun brings hunger instead of warmth. Places where old things wait, and they're still waiting, still feeding. The cabin sits empty still. Nobody'll go near it during the dawn hours. And sometimes when the fog rolls thick through Hanging Valley, people say they can see light moving on the ridge. That shimmer, descending like always, looking for the next person curious enough to witness it. So if you ever find yourself in Appalachia, in some hollow where the sun don't shine full, and someone warned you about the shimmer, you listen. You keep your curtains closed, and you don't, under no circumstances, you don't look at the sunrise, 'cause the glass-eye harvester is still hungry, and it's got an awful lot of light left to feed on. Sleep well now, friend, if you can.